Hi, my name's Mary Pat Jacobs, and welcome to Beyond the Echo Chamber podcast. Why are we here? I live in an echo chamber. We all do to some extent. The echo chamber I'm referring to contains women who are frankly tired, frustrated, and angry about the inequality we experience on a regular basis. Participating in this little bubble, this little female echo chamber, it's validating, it's cathartic, but for me, this only made me more angry with men and more resentful with my husband. And last time I checked, resentment doesn't lead to meaningful change. Like Liz Plank says, we can't improve women's lives if we don't help men. So what I'm doing here is inviting men into conversation about gender equality and masculinity so that you can feel empowered to do the same. In whatever spaces it makes sense to have these conversations. It could be your workplace, it could be your church, your family, your home, your broader community. Having these conversations, these uncomfortable conversations, is important. So come with me as we go beyond the echo chamber, one conversation at a time. Frederick Van Riper is a force, okay? He was the first non-family member and stranger, and he's also a relationship coach for CEOs and entrepreneurs that I have had on the podcast. So episode 10 here feels like a milestone moment for me and for this podcast. You'll notice if you watch the video version that I'm not on there, and that is because I'm learning how to use all of these tools. There's a tool that I've been using called Squadcast. It's from Descript. They used to be separate, and I think Descript acquired them. The platform just was not working, and so we switched over to Zoom, and typically on my video calls, I hide my self view. And so I did that on Zoom, but the recording didn't show. No one cares about this. Cool. So that's why I'm not on video, but Frederick is, and that's actually way more important than me, so that's fine. One thing that really struck me when I was talking with Frederick, in a way, and this is all about going beyond my echo chamber, which when I say that is beyond talking with people who agree with me or see the problem and understand it. He's kind of in my echo chamber. Yes, he identifies as a man. But what I kind of mean by that he's in my echo chamber, is I don't have to convince him that men want rich relationships. He said that himself. I don't have to convince him it's okay for men to go to therapy, or it's okay for him to go to therapy, or that women aren't, wrong in being resentful about their male partners, that women are doing the majority of the emotional work of the relationship. They're taking on that labor, which often includes the emotional work of fixing or improving, nurturing, investing in the relationship. But Frederick didn't always think that way. And we had a conversation about how these things, this growth, and I'm not just talking about men, for women too, because I've gone through a significant amount of growth related to this topic, that can take time and patience. It takes the individual to sort of take it upon themselves to do a lot of introspection, be comfortable with that, give themselves permission to do that, and for that partner to walk along the journey with them. They might be doing the same kind of introspection, or maybe they're further along the journey. Not all of us are willing to do that, or know how to, or have the patience. So if this feels hard, it is hard. Know that it is hard. And the change that you want to see, it may take more time than you think, or that you're willing to give to it. And I think you need to really ask yourself, is that okay? Are you okay with that? Big thank you to Sandi Konta of Done Being Good, which, let's just pause on the name of her platform, Done Being Good. It's like so good. There's so many things to unpack there. Anywho, she recommended that I reach out to Frederick. I had met her on Instagram, so connected with Frederick on Instagram. Social media might be icky, but in this case, it's been wonderful in that I get to connect with people and learn from people who are doing this work. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Let's go. Welcome to the podcast, Frederick. It's great to see you. I'm so glad to have you here.
I am so excited to be here, Mary Pat, and I don't know what we caught on on our technical difficulties, but I wanted to make sure that on record, I thanked you for having me on and just wanted people to understand like I'm inspired by you and what you're doing for the world and just taking the time out of your, busyness of being a mom of three and a full-time worker to host a podcast about these topics that are so important and that can change people's lives. So thank you. It inspires me to keep going too. So
Thank you. I really, really received that. And thank you for that. Thank you. Let's start by just you telling us a little bit about yourself, Frederick.
I'm always a husband and a father first. So I know my wife Sarah's gonna listen to this, so I have to say a shout out to my wife. And I love you, babe, and thank you for making me the man that I am today and helping me be that man. And then yes, I'm a father of two. I have a teenage daughter who is in high school, junior in high school, and then my son is 8 years old in third grade.
We were connected through someone else that we both mutually know on Instagram. So this is how we've met is through social media, which social media can have its really great moments where we get to connect with people that we haven't really met before. And I was really intrigued by the work you're doing as a essentially a relationship coach, a Fair Play certified coach. So and I did do some research. I listened to you on a couple other podcasts and really enjoyed those conversations. So I know a little bit more about how you got to the point of the work you're doing now, but can you tell our audience how you got to the point of being a coach and focusing on these kinds of topics?
Yeah, thank you for allowing me the space to share. And I hope, through this conversation, really my goal is to help one person. If I can, if well, the more conversations I can have with people like you and people in my world, just to get my message out there, I hope that, we can start kind of changing the conversation a little bit and continuing it. So I started my work as a coach because I've always had this in me to like I always wanted to help people. Like, and it sounds so like silly to say, like such a general way of saying that, but I never knew what path to take.
Mm.
And so I kind of lived, I knew I didn't want to be a medical doctor. I hate blood. It's just not in my wheelhouse. My wife is a midwife, so that's tells you a lot about us. But and so yeah, so I was trying to find my path and I thought, for a while that could have been done through the work. I'm passionate about environmental causes, and so I wanted to be a project manager running lead certified projects for in construction. And
Yeah.
I thought, if I could build hospitals and I could build other places where people get cared for, that would fulfill me. And it didn't. And so, which happens, that happens to everybody, right? And so I was kind of still searching. And I thought, well, I need I need to help people at this. I'm not getting any younger and I need to figure this out. And my wife and I kind of sat down and talked about this possibility of entering the coaching world. And it just happened kind of organically that it's like this is maybe what I meant to do. And I feel very comfortable doing this work and I feel fulfilled every day, every conversation I have with someone where I know like maybe I can say one thing to them that will just change their whole life. And that's why I love coaching so much because it's just like that powerful. You may not, you may not have that vision of that blind spot or what's around the corner. You haven't thought about it and you just need someone, it may not be me, but any coach or therapist, anyone that's outside counsel to help you kind of see the things that you're not seeing.
Yeah, that's so great. I'm curious, Frederick, had you had a coach before becoming a coach? Had you ever experienced that side of it?
So I have two coaches right now, but no, prior to actually like making the decision to be a coach, I never had a coach. I did start going to therapy though, which and I understand they're very different, but in there's also some similarities there. And so and I want to actually stop and talk about that for a second because
Sure.
if there's any men listening to this, one of the things I always talk about this, and I think it's part of my mission is to say like going to seek outside counsel and from a professional therapist is is a sign of strength It's not a sign of weakness. Anytime you're lost in your life, asking for help is the fastest way to get to where you need to go. And that doesn't have to be therapy. It can be a coach, it can be a priest, it can be a pastor, it can be your friend. Instead of going to the bar and talking to your friend about who's going to win the football game this weekend, maybe go ask them for coffee or whatever your pleasure is and say, hey, I really need to talk to you about something that I've been struggling with. And having those difficult, what seem like difficult conversations and uncomfortable, I'll say, conversations, those are the things that I have found personally have helped me to grow. And the more you do those things, those things that we define as discomfort, the easier they become. And so then now it's almost like second nature. Like my wife and I have grown more connected because of the amount of uncomfortable conversations we've been willing to have with each other in the past couple of years. And we've been married 9 years, a little over 9 years now. And I would say the first 7 years, we probably didn't have a lot of uncomfortable conversations. And I'll honestly, it's on me more than on my wife. I wasn't really open and willing to do those things. And I don't know how you want to say, like, whether it was like an epiphany or or just
Sure.
a moment. But I realized, like, I think it was more so over the course of some time, I realized, like, that's the only way that this works. It's the only way this works.
Hmm.
Otherwise, what are we doing? If we're not growing together, then we're not going to stay together.
Yeah. What was it that, and if, by the way, there might be questions I ask, and if you're like, I'd rather skip that one, I don't want to go there, you have full permission to set that boundary here. What was it that was holding you? I guess I shouldn't even assume this. Was therapy something that you avoided or didn't want to, you just, you didn't want to do it? You didn't want to pursue it? Was that
Yes.
reality? Okay.
Yes.
So what was it that caused you to have that feeling of not wanting to do it?
Of not wanting to go to therapy,
Yeah.
fear. Fear is a powerful thing, and you can choose to allow it to run your life. And we often do. And I'm not perfect. I don't do everything that I'm afraid of. I do try intentionally to get out of my own way. And I think that's still a practice and probably will be till the day I'm dead. But yeah, I think every day you can set intentions. You can decide who you want to be that day, and you can change who you want to be any moment. I'm not a I'm not a different I'm still the same person that I was when we got married 9.5 years ago. The difference is that I've decided to make a choice for myself to believe in different stories about myself, to believe that things are possible for me as a man, to stop believing in the things I've been told my whole life, the stories that are fed to you and sold to you that you can't be emotional, you can't have difficult conversations, you are a bad listener, all the things. And I just said, I'm done with this. I care. Like, if you make a decision in your life and you bet on yourself and you say, you know what, I'm going to write my own story. I'm going to tell my truth, and I don't care what other people think. And I said this my whole life. I don't care what other people think. The the truth the truth is I did care, and I still, and everyone cares a little bit, of course, but like,
Right.
I really do work on internal validation
Mm,
versus external validation every day, because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is if I can lay my head down at night and be proud of the man I was today. And so I made that decision after, you know, being angry and yelling at my kids for the 10th time or 100th time or whatever, well, like,
hmm
finally, like, realizing, like, I don't want to be this person anymore. Like, I
hmm
don't want to be the father who yells at his kids. I don't want to be the husband who never has an uncomfortable conversation with his wife. I don't want to be the husband who always responds defensively when my
mm,
wife brings me information about how I'm being perceived in my own home.
yeah.
That shift is the most powerful thing, I think, for anyone to hear. It just doesn't have to be just men. Is when your partner brings you a piece of information, I call it data because that's what it really is. It's data about how you're being received and perceived. And so rather than having the immediate defensive reaction, which I used to do, and just trying to just build a wall, I'm safe over here. It never was productive. It didn't get me anywhere. It didn't get us anywhere as a couple. And when you start to realize you can just build a bridge by pausing and receiving the information you're being given, and it's okay if you disagree. I'm not saying that your partner is always correct and everything they bring you is accurate data. However, what I am saying is you can say, hey, I didn't realize I was doing XYZ or being received that way. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? It's a very different way of communicating for me, but it has changed like everything.
Did the fear of being different than the other men around you, or what you thought about what it means to be a man, come into play as you were seeking therapy and doing some of this more uncomfortable work with yourself and with your partner?
I think it's important for everyone listening to understand, like, I'm a big fan of defining things for yourself. And that is something I think it allows you to have agency over your own life, to stop listening to the definitions that other people have handed you, and to start asking yourself some difficult questions about your past traumas, your past pain, because we've all had pain on different levels. And it's not a competition. It's an individual thing. It's inner work. It's things that you probably avoid doing because that's, again, we're talking about being uncomfortable. And I most of the episode so far we've talked about uncomfortable conversations with other people. But I think it's also important to have those uncomfortable conversations with yourself. And so having the reflection back on your experiences as a young person, for me, a young boy, and the friendships and the difficulties and navigating being a man in the world, not really having this perspective I have now of making up my own definition, but kind of going along with the herd. And like you had mentioned, like fitting in. This idea of
Yes.
fitting in is is what holds most of us back from having the things that we want in life, having those rich relationships with your partner and with other men or other women. Like for me, I want rich relationships with other men. And if I said that when I was a teenager, I would have been ridiculed, laughed at, told all the things you're told, like called different names that I don't even want to say on the podcast.
Totally.
And so like, and I've always felt a little bit disconnected from men, to be honest. I never really could pinpoint it. I have the language. I never read the books that I've read now, and had the information, and been on kind of on my own journey of figuring it all out. So, yeah, like, I guess to answer your question, like defining masculinity for yourself, and it's individual. I don't think there's one definition. I don't. I think that you get to decide what you want it to mean for you. And that's great. Whatever
Yeah.
that is what it should be. And for me, I don't love labels. I just don't love labels. I find them to be reasons why people will dislike someone or hate someone even. It's
Yes.
like put them in a box, then they're all the same.
Mm.
And each one of us is uniquely different, beautiful, and has our own gifts to share with the world. And so it really, like, to me, it's like I don't want to like spend too much time worrying about if I'm fitting into someone else's definition of what masculinity means to them. I want to just, like I said earlier, I want to lay my head down at night and be proud of who I was today. Was I kind to myself? Was I kind to the stranger that I met on the street? Did I show up as the father I want to be today? Did I show up as the husband I want to be today? And I don't hit those boxes every day, but I sure as hell try to. And I reflect on it every night before I fall asleep. And then I wake up with an intention in the morning to do the same thing, to be the person that I'm trying to be.
Mm.
And I love this Matthew McConaughey quote, which you may know. It was from his Oscar-winning speech where he says that he needs three things every day, but one of the things he needs is someone to chase. And he talks about himself in the future. He's chasing himself at 10 years from now. And the guy, he tells the story, and then the guy comes to him and says, you know, have you, so it's 10 years later, and he's like, oh, so you finally caught up to yourself? He's like, no, I'm still chasing myself 10 years from now. So
Mm.
I'm always trying to get better. There's always something more to learn. And where I think a lot of people go wrong in relationships is they are playing to win. And when you play to win, you don't win. You have you and I used to do it. So
Yeah,
I know like
same.
you don't win. So I play to learn now. And that's
Mm.
something that I got from Kobe Bryant, who's one of my like all-time favorite people. Just the way he went about the dedication he had to his craft, was just unmatched. And so he talked about he didn't play to win, or he wasn't afraid to lose.
Mm.
He played to learn the game. And so it's kind of the same thing. This way I approach my relationship now is I just want to learn more. I want to know more about
Mm-hmm.
myself, about my wife, about how my kids receive me. What can I do better?
That's so great. I feel like what you're describing, that kind of self work, that introspection, being kind to yourself, this is like self awareness, emotional intelligence, terms I'm sure people have maybe heard before. And I wonder how many people feel like they actually have permission to do that, to be introspective. So, what would you say to people who are like, I don't even know how to do that. I don't even know how to start that process of, and maybe not going straight to like, what does masculinity mean to you, but something of like checking in with myself in this moment. How do I feel right now? Something like that. Like, what would you tell someone who just hasn't really done that kind of I guess work? I don't know. I don't want to call it work to minimize that they're not doing it, but hopefully you understand what I'm saying.
I understand. It is challenging because I think again, we're back to the fear, really. It's everyone has an inner monologue, an inner dialogue, I believe. Although I heard some stat recently that said 30% of people don't, and I don't understand. I don't know if that's
Oh,
true.
not
I,
me.
I was like, well, at least I'm in the 70% camp, but
Exactly.
but
Majority, yay.
but I think, if you I think a lot of people don't take time to think. And
Mm,
so start by going, I mean, I guess I would say start small. Start by going outside on a walk without your device,
mm,
and just kind of think about where you're at. Are you proud of who you are? What can you change? What do you want? People don't give themselves permission to actually chase the things that they want. They don't think they're deserving of the things that they want often.
mm. Yeah.
And and so they self-sabotage. And part of that self-sabotage looks like not doing the work, not reflecting, not journaling, not thinking, not spending time connecting. I think what's important to note is that if you're struggling in your relationship, or even just with if you're outside of a relationship and you want to be in a relationship someday, or even if you don't, if it's just you do have a relationship with yourself. So what's important, I think, is to realize that, again, like my biggest things are get out of your own way. The comfort zone is where relationships go to die. If you are staying comfortable, if everything feels cozy all the time, then you are not growing. And if you are not growing, you are dying. I believe that. You have to apply a growth mindset to your relationship. And most people kind of like check the box of marriage, or just girlfriend, boyfriend. And it's like, okay, I'm in a relationship now. And then they focus on their job. And that's
Yeah.
awesome. Like having being fulfilled through your profession, if that's where you're at, like that's there's nothing wrong with that. However, you ask people at the end of their life, what would they regret the most?
Mm,
9 times out of 10, maybe 10 times out of 10, they're going to say, I wish I spent more time with my family. I wish I spent more time with my kids. I wish I had a better relationship with my partner.
yeah.
So, what I'm trying to do with my work is to tell people you can have that now. You don't have to wait till your deathbed to regret. You can decide to create the life you want now. Everything is possible for you. It's an abundant mindset, it's a growth mindset. You can have it if you want it, but you have to do the work. You
Mm-hmm.
have to be willing to get uncomfortable, because if you stay in your comfort zone, you will not get what you want
Mm,
ever, in business, in relationships, in
yeah.
spirituality, nothing. You will not get what you want. Life will give you what you deserve. And what you deserve is to be comfortable then. I don't want to be comfortable. I want to be happy.
Yeah.
I want to work for it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, and you were talking about sort of like how do you start this introspection? I completely agree. Like we just don't we our society is a very hustle society. We are busy as a value. And so,
Mm.
if you're not busy, if you're not just a person in motion all the time, then when do you have time to think? And we have these devices. Like I find myself struggling with that. And I'm a big proponent of mindfulness and introspection, but just even finding, 5 minutes just to sit with my thoughts is pain. It's hard. It hurts. Like it's hard for me to just do that. So I can relate to the challenge of that. Asking yourself what you want. That is a really big question and really hard to answer. And so I'm going to ask you this really hard question and maybe even level it up a bit by making it more complicated and hard to answer by asking you, so when the men that you've been working with in your coaching practice, what is it that they want? What do men want?
So it's a loaded question, and of course I can't speak for all men, and there's across the board, it could be lots of different things, right? However, I think what you're trying to get at, and you can correct me at the end if I'm reading this wrong, but men want the same things that I want. They want rich relationships with other men. They just may not be willing to say that out loud. They want rich relationships with their partners. They are sabotaging themselves or afraid to admit it because it sounds, you know, emotional. I think most men, especially men in relationships, you don't get married. I hope most people don't get married, I would say, to fail at marriage. Like
Mm,
that's not true.
right.
They want it to work. What they don't realize is that it actually takes work.
So much work.
So it's not like check the box and then I think I put a post up somewhere that says like men get engaged, but then they don't stay engaged.
Mm, that's
So,
good.
and it's like the
Yeah.
engagement doesn't stop. It
Yeah.
can't stop.
Yeah.
And we tend to because and again it's not always malicious. Often it's
Mm,
because you have reasons, let's say, which I would call excuses. I think reason is overused and dishonestly used as another word for excuse.
mm,
People don't want to say the word excuse, so they say reason. And people will justify their excuses for not having a successful relationship. And then they will blame the other person
mm-hmm.
because it can never be their own fault.
Yeah.
We all do this. I'm not sitting on a high horse over here saying I have a perfect marriage, a perfect relationship, and I operate perfectly every day. That is not the case. So please don't mistake what I'm saying as that. What I am saying is that we need if you want to have success in anything, you need to stop making excuses and stop justifying them. There's plenty for everyone, but you have to know what you want. Often when you ask people what they want, they tell you what they don't want. I
Oh,
think a lot of people don't
sure.
even know what they want. I always say the truth is the starting line. And
Mm,
and having that extreme honesty with yourself, say, you know what? And this is what I did about 3 years ago. I said, I'm 45 now. So I was 42 and I said, what do I want? Do I want to stay married? Yes. Do I want to see my kids every day of my life? Yes. What do I need to do? Who do I need to become? If you want to continue in a relationship that you're in, you need to start doing the work. If you
yeah.
want to be the father that you know you should be for your kids, you need to do the work. If you don't know something, you need to ask, get a coach, get a therapist, read a book. We live in the age of information.
So much.
There
Yeah.
are no excuses anymore. There
Yeah.
aren't. I don't want
Yeah.
to hear it. I really don't. And like, if you hire me as a coach, I will tell you right now that if you don't commit to doing the work, I will not coach you. I will not take your money. It's not fair to me. It's not fair to you. Time is precious. Time is valuable. I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not going to let you waste your time. I'm just not.
Yeah.
So you have
Yeah.
to commit to it.
Absolutely. Preach. Love it. And this is, I think, the thing that sort of somewhat spurred this actual podcast to even happen, creating this entire podcast, not just this particular episode. And that is the resentment that I was experiencing in my own relationship and that I
Mm,
was observing in the relationships the women I know had with their partners, of just this feeling of, we're doing the work, we're doing the work. And I know doing the work, by the way, is sort of like tropey now, but it's still, it works. It's I don't have a substitute for it, so I'm going to still say it. But that we feel like we're putting effort in, we're doing our own,
mm,
self work, and where are our partners in this? And I think that imbalance almost just created more. And I will also speak for myself. Not perfect. Don't claim
mhm.
to be perfect. My husband and I have the same arguments as everyone else. And I know those who've listened to the other episodes where I'm interviewing my husband, where we're having a conversation, make it seem like, wow, they must talk about it all the time and just have these really like great introspective conversations. No, 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 no. Something changes when you have a microphone in front of you, and you know you're being recorded. We still have the same kind of fights, but I think the thing that people sort of get stuck in, women specifically get stuck in, that at least from what I've experienced, is that feeling of like, I don't know how much more I can do. What else can I actually do? Because it almost
Mm,
feels unfair that I have to then consider, how am I going to help my partner get to a point of wanting to do the work, if that makes
mhm.
sense.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. You're touching on a point that I think a lot of people struggle with, which is, it's a lopsided, imbalanced scenario in most heteronormative relationships where the woman is doing most of the work, the mental load, the invisible work, which includes often the emotional labor that it takes to improve the relationship. And and how do you I guess repair the those feelings of resentment that tend to stack on top of one another over the course of a period of time? And I think, first of all, acknowledging that it's there is super important. I think a lot of people are, again, with fear, they are afraid to bring it up, afraid to have another fight, and so they either ignore it or let it go, and then resentments build and build and build, and then it gets worse. And then they might be headed for divorce. I know the statistic out there is that, like, often it's 2 years as an average time of someone thinking about divorce before they actually say they want a divorce. 2 years.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
again, part of my mission is to help people before they're at that point, because I don't really consider myself a divorce coach. And I'm sorry for anyone listening that might be at that point who's, you know, really kind of at their wits' end and not sure where they're headed. It's very difficult, and I feel for you, but I want to help people avoid that cliff. I want to meet them upstream, before these resentments start to stack, and help them kind of with some tools and skills and realizing some just different perspectives.
What would you say to the women generally who might be in that situation where they feel like they have taken on so much of the emotional burden of the relationship that they don't know what to do next?
So Eve Rodksy in the book Fair Play, she talks about somebody has to be the game changer. And I think that's really a powerful frame to think about it in, because it's true. Like, do you want it to work? We get back to this question, what do you want? And if you want the relationship to work, somebody has to be the courageous game changer to step up and say, kind of almost like scream from the mountaintop sort of thing, like the town crier, hey, there's something wrong here and something needs to change. What I don't want is to continue down the road we're going down, and because if we do that, that means I'm accepting your behavior, and I'm choosing to accept it. But really what's happening behind closed doors, so to speak, is that you're not accepting it, you're just not talking about it. And so the resentment builds, there's no repairs being made. If you don't speak up, they may not know. And nobody can read minds. Communication is something that people don't do, and they don't do it well. We're afraid to say some things for fear of the backlash of what that might bring,
Yeah.
which is, again, back to the comfort zone. So like really, like, my whole thing is about stepping into your truth, living your truth, talking about your truth. How are you receiving this person? Let them know so that they can make the decision to change or not. You can't make someone do something different, but you can offer an invitation. Eve talks about invitations in her book. And there's a great video by Dan Stillman where he talks about invitations and how you can craft your words to, rather than coming at someone with a confrontation, you're actually inviting them in to say, hey, like, we decided X amount of time ago to make this work, to be together, and we want to build a life together. And here's what that looks like for me. And I want to know what it looks like for you. And so what a lot of people make a mistake, and we haven't talked about fair play much on the episode, but what I will say is a lot of people want to jump right into the system. They want to implement the system. They want to get everything defined, who's doing what, CPE, so cool. Love it. But you skip the step about core values. So now you don't have enough why behind why you're doing this. You don't know your husband or your partner. They don't know why you want to do this. And possibly you don't know the perspective of your male partner, why he would be willing to do it or won't be, or what are his blocks to it. Those conversations need to happen right up front, because if they don't, the system is only going to work as good as those whys. Those, and when I say whys, I mean deep reasons why this is important to you to implement this system. So having those core values, you have your individual core values and you have your shared core values. And if you haven't defined what those shared core values are, you need to. You need to. And the resentment stuff, I will say, like, Sarah and I are still working on that, because we had 7 years of not really meeting each other where we needed to meet each other. And like I said earlier, most of that's on me. I was part of that one-sided, lopsided, mental load, missing partner. And so we talk every week now. We meet every week. We have a standing meeting. Part of my program is applying business fundamentals into your life, into your organization. Eve says, and she's right, is your home. How is it organized? How are you running it? And if you can apply business fundamentals, data, numbers, how many date nights are you having every week? How many date nights are you having every month? Oh, 0. Well, wonder why you feel disconnected. You know,
Yeah.
you're not doing the work. You're not intentionally talking. How many uncomfortable conversations have we had this month? If that number is 0, you're not growing, because I guarantee you had a fight.
Yeah.
How many fights have we had this month? Good number to track. And it's okay. Like, we all, like you said, we all have fights. The thing is, and I talk to people about this in my program, it's not the argument should not be you versus your partner. It should be both of you versus the problem.
Absolutely. I think that's
And
what we get so wrong.
It's just a shift. It's a very simple shift. When you have a conflict, stop making it about my opinion is right and yours is wrong. It's like, hey, what do you think about this? I'm curious.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I disagree. I see it completely different. Here's what I think.
Yeah.
And there's no attachment to the outcome, or there shouldn't be, right? It's like we're on the same side. We want to solve the problem. We want to come to an agreement. What will I accept? What will you accept? It's not personal.
Yeah.
My favorite book, by the way, I have to say this, and people who have been following me long enough know this, but my favorite book is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. The 2 agreements that I really resonate with are: don't take anything personally and don't make assumptions. And if you cannot, and it's so hard to do.
Oh, yeah.
But if you can avoid making assumptions, because I make assumptions about like what my wife means, rather than just saying like, hey, what did you mean?
Yeah.
It's like so simple. It's such a simple change, but I catch myself, and I'm really trying hard not to, is like I'll react or I'll respond to something she didn't even say. I put meaning behind her words that she did not intend. So rather than clarifying, I'm just immediately assuming, and then we fight for no reason, which is like the worst, So I think it's important to really pause and reflect and have difficult conversations and change the way you communicate, and most importantly, start communicating.
Yes, absolutely. So a few things on that. The assumptions piece I totally relate to. And I love how Brene Brown, who just sort of resurfaced after a year of hardship, she was on an Instagram live with Adam Grant yesterday, and it was a lovely conversation. It was so great to see her again. I act like I know her. I don't, but I'm a fangirl, fan over here. It's so great to see you, Brene. But she talks about expressing it either to yourself or in actual verbal communication as the story I'm telling myself is blank. And I use this in some of the training I do at my organization, but I also use it in any kind of communication I have with my family, with my friends, with my husband. The story I'm telling myself is this. And I
Mm,
think what that does is makes it doesn't make it like you're doing this or you're in it like an accusation. It's like this is the thing that I think is happening, but help it sort of puts it over here as something tangible to say, yeah, that's true, or no, no, no. It's almost like it creates a stimuli to react to in the moment versus it
mm.
just being words directed at someone else. And so that's one thing I found to be really helpful. Another thing is, and I remember this from reading Fair Play, I have a couple of the books. I have two books behind me and two decks of cards behind me. But I read the book years
I got one
ago.
too.
Oh,
I got
good.
one
I
too.
love it that you have it handy. I loved how Eve was like, we're communicating. And she uses the story a lot of
Mm,
the laundry, the wet
hmm.
laundry
Yeah,
on the bed. Like, you're communicating. It's just not helpful communication.
right.
Right. And so I found that to be helpful. And I think the thing, there's sort of a through line of a lot of what we're talking about here, Frederick, that doing the work, it requires patience
Hmm.
and time. And I think for myself, I will speak for myself, and I don't know any of us that are like really truly, but like I want the quick fix. I want things to change. I want to have like one really good conversation with my husband or read a book or say, "Oh my gosh, on that road trip we listened to this podcast together," and then have it be like, "Okay, perfect, we're good now." But just the fact that it requires patience to grow within yourself, to have that communication with one another. And I'll bring this down to like an actual example using Fair Play. I read Fair Play probably 3 years ago, maybe months after that when I bought the deck of cards. I didn't even open up the cards for probably a year. And I remember telling my husband, I have this deck of cards. Like, I'd love to go through this sometime, but it was just always this, I feel like we're going to sit down, we're going to go through these cards and it's going to turn into a fight. And when are we going to do it? Because after we put the kids to bed, we don't want to do anything
Mm.
that requires a lot of work. We just want to watch a show together and go to bed. So it took 3 years ago when I first read the book to just this past November. And I was like, Josh, we're going to turn this into a podcast episode. You and I are going to sit down and start going through these cards for that to actually happen. So I just hope people listening to this are understanding that these things take time and patience is actually going to be an incredible tool as you navigate this.
I love that. I think that's a great point. And I always talk about having grace for your partner. I'm obsessed with learning.
Same.
Maybe a problem, I don't know. But I
It's not
think
a
it's
problem.
helpful. I do love talking about failure because people love talking about failure
Mm,
and and my coach loves talking about failure too. But I think we have it all wrong with failure. We get to this point where we think like if we don't hit all the marks, it's a fail. And that's just not true.
mm,
Like it's a win to that you even talk about fair play. It's a win that you're having an uncomfortable conversation. It's a win that you're going to try to do better tomorrow. It's like all of these things are wins, and you need to celebrate those wins. And as you're navigating through the process of what I would consider a transformation, you're basically 10xing your household or the way you run it if you implement fair play. If you're doing something that drastically different than the way you did it before, that is a powerful transformation. But it does, like you said, it takes time and refinement. And maybe you'll find that something you tried didn't work. Okay, that's fine. That
yeah.
happens. That happens. So
Right.
now do something else, like change it, tweak it. It's yours. It's not Eve's. It's not mine. It's not Mary Pat's. It's your
Mm,
life, and you get to decide how you want to run it. And fair play is a tool and a system, but you get to like create that for yourself.
yeah.
And maybe you'll think of something that nobody else has thought of, and you can create that and implement that too. So it doesn't stop with fair play. To me, fair play is where we start. Don't skip the step of the core values.
Yeah.
That when we talk about patience and time, don't jump right into the cards. Take the time and spend a really nice evening with your partner. What your values were 10 years ago are not necessarily the same as they are today.
Right.
What's our goals for our relationship this year?
Mhm.
What do we want? What are our
Yeah.
personal goals that may affect each other as well? If someone wants to run a marathon, that's time out of the house. You need to talk about that.
Yeah.
You don't just say I'm going to run a marathon. See ya, peace. You got to talk about those types of things.
Yeah. Totally agree. That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to start to bring us to a little bit of conclusion here. The name of this podcast is Beyond the Echo Chamber. And it's called that because I felt like for myself, I needed to talk to other people, specifically those who identify as men, about the things that women seem to be, frankly, pissed off about in their relationships, in society, in a lot of other parts of our lives, and just understand if men are aware of these things that women are upset about and what we do about it, especially if men can be part of the solution. And
Mhm.
so, as we think about this being going beyond the echo chamber, getting out of our own, because we all have echo chambers, getting out of that and having more conversation, what's something our listeners can do to get out of their own echo
Yeah,
chambers?
it's a phenomenal question, Mary Pat. And I have a phenomenal answer.
Love it. I
So,
am here for this confidence. I love it.
for the men listening, join a men's group like today. Find a men's group and join it. I just found one that I haven't gone to the first meeting yet. I'm super excited. I didn't even know Syracuse had one. When I looked for dads groups and I couldn't find any dads groups. So I actually started my own dads group. We had our first meeting a couple weeks ago. And so if anyone's listening in the Syracuse area, which probably, maybe they're not, but I hope they are, and I hope they will, join the dads group I created. It's called Dads Interrupted. We meet on the third Thursday at Strong Hearts Cafe in Syracuse, and we talk about all things dads, and we don't disparage women. We talk about how we can be better husbands, better fathers, what we're dealing with, what our struggles are. Yeah. So join a group, find men that want to grow in their relationships. Find other men that want to do the same thing you're doing and talk to them about the difficult things that you're going through. Get a therapist if you never have. Get a coach if you think you need one. All like anything you can do to advance the conversation. And gender equity, fair play is all about gender equity,
Mhm.
gender equality, and we know there's a pay gap. I want to be an ally and learn about that experience and understand more for my daughter's sake and for my wife's sake and for the future generation's sake, my son's sake. For my son, I need to know what he needs to know
Mm.
and how to be a good man in the world.
Any other final words you wanted to share before we sign off here, Frederick?
Follow me on Instagram. I do a journal post every day. I will answer your questions if you send them to me. I'm not going to charge you money if you have one question you need answered or just curious about the work I do or just want to know something. My goal is to serve. It's to help in any way I can.
This is so great. Thank you so much for the conversation here. And I'm so glad that you took the time to share your experiences with our audience here. I'll make sure to get everything that you mentioned as far as Fair Play and your Instagram linked in the show notes so people can reach out to you and follow you and connect with you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Mary Pat. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Frederick and I covered so much ground in that conversation, which is why it's probably one of the longest episodes I have so far, but totally worth it. We didn't even really get to discussing the fair play system, which I feel bad about, but that just means I'll have to invite him on to really go in depth on that topic so he can explain the system, explain the cards, and answer the abundance of questions that I have about fair play that I'd love his perspective on. Some reflection questions for you based on this episode. There are 4 of them. 1, do you relate to Frederick's statement that men get engaged, but they don't stay engaged? I loved that. By the way, he has so many good one-liners. I know I really related to this. We work so hard to prepare for the wedding. We kind of forget about the years of marriage, the decades of marriage, a lifetime. Presumably that happens after. 2, do you have rich relationships? Is that how you would describe? I'm particularly interested in how you might think about this if you identify as a man. How do you define rich relationships for yourself? 3, have you considered therapy or counseling for yourself or as a couple, if you're in a relationship, if you haven't yet scheduled the appointment, what's holding you back? And really sit with that and ask why. Keep asking why. The fourth question here is a really big one, and this is why I'm ending with it. What do you want? What do you want? It's a really big question, but we don't ask ourselves that. We're so busy answering that for others or providing others what they want. It may actually take you more than a couple minutes to figure out how to answer it. But really interrogate that with why. Your first answer, ask why. Why did I just answer it that way? What do you want? Do you have ideas or topics that we can discuss here? Do you want to be on the show, or do you have a recommendation of a man that I should invite on the show? Email me at beyondtheechochamberpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at beyondtheechochamberpod. You can find me on Facebook and YouTube as well. All the same names, Beyond the Echo Chamber Podcast. Thank you for being here. Go have those hard conversations.